everyone, Psycho Dude Horror here, and today we'll be resuming My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown. Today we're starting with chapter 4, and then we will continue with chapter 5, because I haven't been back in 5 freaking months. So if you guys enjoy, leave a like and subscribe, and remember, stay scary. Day 21. Gladly we made it a few days without incident after my encounter with the creature of which I still have no name for. We haven't seen any since, but we've heard them outside, and I've noticed that they tend to become more vocal at night. I've thought that many times to myself, since my supply run to the neighbor's house of what horrors I might have found in the last 2 rooms on the second floor hallway, I only made it halfway down the hall before running into and fighting that creature. What happened to Eric or the kids? Those are questions that kept surfacing in my mind, but I wasn't sure I really wanted to know the answer to. Thanks to my expedition, we now had a bow and a set of arrows, as well as a healthier supply of food. This, however, was only a temporary solution in mind for one reason that I knew, and pretty much shit bow, having very little practice with one. I also knew that we really kept staying here. I knew it. We really couldn't keep staying here. I knew it, and Grace knew it. We had to find a way out of this town and somehow more secure. But how? My truck isn't strong enough to push the Humvees out of the way, and there isn't enough room to go around them. I sat on the couch with Addie as she played on her tablet. The girls have been so well behaved during the whole ordeal so far, and I'm thankful that that even though they don't really know what's going on, they're listening very well and being quiet when we need them to be for their safety. The dogs, on the other hand, have been acting almost completely oblivious to what's going on, except for a few key moments when they have barked when we needed them to be quiet. Thankfully, they haven't caused any huge problems, and we've been able to quiet them down quickly. Just as I was thinking that, I hear Grace whispering from the other room. "Trevin, the front door! Bring me Addie!" I shot up and grabbed Addie, carrying her to Grace as she moved the girls upstairs. As I handed her Addie and turned to the door, I saw what she was signaling me for. One of the creatures had made it on our porch and was pacing around. I moved to the kitchen, grabbed the bow off the top of the fridge along with a handful of arrows, having the tip screwed on previously in preparation. I moved up to the front door and unlocked it, opening it while the creature was on the far end of the porch. I backed up about 10 feet and took a knee, knocking an arrow and drawing it back, aiming at the opening of the door. One of the things I learned on my supply run was that the creature seemed to be blind, but they're hunting through sound mostly and possibly smell. As long as I was very quiet, I could at least get one shot off before it knew I was there. I sat in silence, bow drawn. The creature slowly walked towards the doorway and stepped past the threshold. I clicked my tongue, and the beast froze and focused its head directly on the sound, directly at me. And at that split second, I released and let the arrow fly. I'd aimed for the slits on his nose, but missed that mark, but did make contact. I hit the creature on the shoulder, and it buried itself halfway in. The creature let out a screech as I knocked under the arrow and drew it back. Drawing the bow each time felt like fresh knives being stabbed into my wounded shoulder. Firing a second time, hitting the mark this time, dropping the beast where it stood. As I hit the beast, it released plumes of purplish gray fog into the air, and upsettingly into our house. I got off my knee and fully sat down, just relaxing to let my heart settle back down. from the suspense. As I stared at the now dead creature blocking my open front door, I heard movement on steps very shortly after the door, and steps cracked back open. Through the slit, I met eyes with my wife, and since she saw that I was sitting calmly, she opened the door the rest of the way and stepped into the room. Dogs and the girls are in Addie's room playing quietly. She answered my question before I even asked. Just seeing that it's what was on my mind by the look in my eyes. This being the first time Grace had a close-up look at one of the creatures, she walked up to inspect it. Is this just like the other frog lurker that you fought over at Eric's? She asked as I knelt looking down at its unusual form. Yeah, it looked more ready for it this time though, I confirmed as I began to stand back up. We need to move that body up. Holy shit! Grace interrupted me as he grabs one of the arrows, prodding from the frog lurker, ripping it out as she runs back towards me. She covers half the distance between us before I see one of the raccoon-sized flaming spider creatures run through the door towards us. I kneel to grab another arrow lying by my side on the ground as it jumps at me. Grace swings the arrow in her hand and connects with it, not doing much damage, but hitting it hard enough to change its course midair so it wouldn't hit me. Grace took 2 steps back, grabbing the shaft of the arrow in both hands. It was essentially a sharp stick, but she knew that, but it was better than being completely unarmed. I knocked a new arrow and turned to the beast, drawing the bow, sending whipping pain through my shoulder at the same time. Just as I turned to meet Grace's eyes, with the spider grabs her head and torn, horrific flashing images in her mind. In a panic, I fired, missing the center of the mad beast, but pinning its 2 legs to the floor, immobilizing it. It lets out a guttural scream, and it switches its gaze towards me. I try to look away, but I'm too slow, and our eyes meet, sending pictures of torture and gore through my mind like a mental tsunami crashing through an ocean-front city. As I become stunned, Grace was released from the creature's mental assault. She recovered quickly and lunged at the creature, bearing an arrow in its hands into the back. The creature broke eye contact with me and let out another scream of anguish. Grace scrambled to her feet and backed away from the creature, and we both realized that what we thought were flames were nothing but orange bioluminescent hairs. They were nothing more than an illusion. At the very convincing, but nevertheless an illusion. I ran to the lurker in the doorway and ripped my last arrow out of its face. Knocking it, peacefully drew back the bow, took aim, and fired. The screams of the creature suddenly stopped as the arrow pierced its neck, just below the skull, ripping through its throat and killing it. As it lies dead, Grace and I, breathing heavy, met eyes. Maybe I'm not as shit as a bow as I thought, I said, dropping the bow to the ground and walking over to Grace, who was clearly still tense from the battle. She wrapped her arms around me, slowing her breathing, and whispered, "What the fuck is happening?" "I really wish I knew," I replied. "We need to get these bodies outside and get the door closed so we don't let any more of that frog in," she said as letting go, and I began pulling the arrows out of the flame spider. So far we hadn't noticed any actual problems with the frog other than its odd nature. It didn't seem to be dangerous in any way. That being said, I fully agreed with her and didn't really feel like taking any chances with it. We got the lurker outside and off the porch, and my wife grabbed the spider by the legs and threw it out the door, knocking it into the front yard. It hit the ground with a thud a few feet from the lurker. We closed and locked the door. I grabbed the fan from the basement, aimed it out one of the windows to the purge of the house and the fog best I could. Grace opened the door to the foot of the steps leading upstairs to find both dogs waiting on the other side. Womp promptly ran and began sniffing the 2 spots where the body had been lying on the carpet. Both my wife and I went upstairs to check on the girls. Izzy had fallen asleep on a pile of stuffed animals for an impromptu nap. Addie was covered Addie had covered her with one of her blankets and used the other to curl up next to her little sister and passed out as well. Fog lurker, I say to Grace as we close the door behind us, let the girl sleep. What? That's what you called it from downstairs? I didn't have a name for them before. I like it. It fits. Are you Sean? She smiles, but before it quickly fades as we hear the dogs let out a bark, each thing come running upstairs past us into the bedroom. Grace and I look at each other and run downstairs. Before we got downstairs, we saw the problem. Having our front door open as we fought the two creatures let their screams of pain alert others. None of the lurkers were present, but we saw at least 3 of the flaming spiders walking in circles around the outside of the house. Grace and I looked at each other, and without a word, we both set out in different directions, making sure the blinds were closed on all the windows. After about an hour of periodic checking on the creatures left, after we confirmed that there were none of them left around the house, my nerves started to settle, and I realized that they were really hungry. So I began to cook something for us all in the kitchen. Grace checked on the girls, and they joined me in the kitchen to help me get some food ready. We all ate and decided that we had more than enough excitement for one day and gathered everyone upstairs for the night. We need to get out of here. I feel like they know why we are here now, Grace whispered to me as we sat watching the girls play quietly to wind down for the day. I know, there was a lot of activity and a lot of noise today, but I think I may have a plan, I said, wondering if my plan was even possible and even if we had all the parts available. Mommy, play Barbies with me, Addie said as she raced over to Grace, Barbie in hand. Grace crawled over to play with her for a little while as I went to the bathroom to remove my bandages and see how much damage I had done to my stitches. We all gathered in our bedroom again as always that night, but instead of lying awake as we had so many nights before, all of us slept hard, deep in the dreamless slumber until we awoke the next morning. Day 22. After we got Addie and Izzy settled for breakfast, Grace asked me about what the details of my plan were. I realized that our conversation had gotten cut short last night due to Addie's request to play Barbies. Knowing that we needed something to move the Humvees out of the way, or we would have no way out of town. Also knowing that my truck would be unable to move them, I'd remember that just 2 blocks away there was a farm equipment repair building that usually had some form of large, powerful farm equipment parked in the front that would be able to move the military vehicles so that we could leave. This was a much longer journey than hopping the fence to get food from the neighbors. Also, I had no guarantee that there would be any big tractors or equipment there. Sometimes it's an empty parking lot, and if I made that journey just be met with emptiness in the parking lot, I would be screwed. Not to mention if I were able to get the thing started, if there was something there would be so many unknown variables, yet it still seemed to be the only viable option. Why don't you just take the truck and drive over there to see if there is anything there? Grace asked with considerable insight. I thought about that, but I don't want to draw any more attention to myself before we are ready to go. You know the truck is kind of loud, I replied. For this plan to work, I'm going to have to get over there. Start whatever I can find as a bulldozer. Move the Humvees out of the way. All while you gather all the supplies you can, get the dogs and the girl loaded in the vans, and meet me at the roadblock to get us out of here. That's a lot of steps, and a lot can go wrong, she said. I know, but can you think of any ideas? Any better ideas? I replied, nearly begging her to come up with a better idea. No, you're right, there aren't any better options, she relented. So, when do we start prepping? Sadly, I think the sooner the better. Since we clearly attracted attention to our house, I said, referencing to the parade of creatures that we had around the house last night. Let's gather the stuff up from the house tonight. We can try to get out of here to the van in the morning. It seems like I see them walking around at least throughout midday, so that's when we will plan to go. She nodded in agreement. The rest of the day went rather quietly. We packed together supplies as if we would be living in the van for a week, loading food into boxes and coolers, clothing and diapers, dog food, electronics, and cables, everything we would need. We moved everything to the back door in preparation for executing our plan, with tension high and nerves rattled in anticipation for how the plan would play out tomorrow. We went to bed. So guys, that was part 4, or chapter 4. We are going to do part 5 now. And if you guys have not, check out the original book on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can read it over here on the Reddit, on the No Sleep Reddit. It's by Cryptic Nightmares. You can get both books on Amazon. It's My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown, and My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown, Searching for a Way Out. So yeah, check out Cryptic Nightmares on Reddit, and go check out the books on Amazon. And remember, if you're enjoying this, leave a like and subscribe. So here's chapter 5. Day 23. We spent the morning letting the girls play in the toy room as Grace and I carefully and quietly loaded the van up with our pre-packaged supplies, working in silence as we both felt the tension from the impending trial we were soon to be experiencing. The dog watched inquisitively as we moved the bags and boxes from the house to the van. I could tell they were beginning to get excited at the sight of thinking we would be going for a car ride. Every time we came back from the house, Bodhi would begin wagging his tail and alternate his glancings from me to the leash hanging by the door. "Soon, Bodhi. Just relax, poopy face," I said to him as I patted him on the head, coming in for the last time. He trotted off and found a spot to lie down near the girls playing. May, on the other hand, continued to follow me around the house for the next 20 minutes, insisting that it was time to go for a ride. We ate lunch, and as we finished, Grace and I met eyes silently agreed that it was time. She gave me a hug and a kiss. We told each other that we loved each other. I grabbed the bow, inspected it to make sure that it hadn't been broken in any way, put all the arrows I could fit in a bow-mounted quiver, and walked to the front door. "Okay, get the girls and the dogs ready. Stay in the house until you hear a big machine start up. Then get them in the van and meet me on the east side of town closest to the interstate," I said as I turned the handle to walk out the door. "Please be careful," Grace says as I walk out the door. "I will. Just make sure you're ready to go. This is basically our one shot we have at this," I said, looking into her eyes to let her know how serious the situation was and closing the door behind me. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves as I crouched at the top of the steps on the front porch. The purple shimmer of the fog swirled around me. Quietly, I moved the steps over to the huge oak tree in the corner of our yard, just to the side of the intersection. Crouched by the tree, I scanned my surroundings, this being the first time I've been able to see any further than the tree since the fog rolled into town. Screeching came from the distance, but from the opposite direction. then where I was traveling. Diagonal across from the intersection was my position. Sits a house with the 4-foot privacy fence. In the back and through their backyard was the shortest distance to my intended destination. The door to the house was destroyed and looked like it had been ripped from the hinges. The front door had been smashed in, but nothing but silence came from the house. I ran directly to the backyard, aiming to hop over the far side of the fence as cover. Just as I reached the other yard, I see from the corner of my eye the orange glow of one of the spider creatures, brightening as it travels down the street in my direction. I hopped the fence and lay flat on the other side, peering through the slits, hoping that I wouldn't be noticed. Close behind the spider was another, and another, and another, until there was a group of 5 of them crawling in a group down the street. As I hit the ground on the other side of the fence, the spiders skidded into the intersection and continued down the road. When they got directly in front of me on the road, I looked around and noticed that all my focus on being quiet and watching for the spiders travel towards me, that had caused me to ignore the fact that the neighbor's big black dog had been lying next to me, mangled and violently destroyed. It had been clearly killed and sucked dry by one of those lurkers and left in the hollow pile of fur and flesh to rot in the yard. I grimaced at the sight, hating to see the dog torn to shreds like that. I waited almost a full minute after the creatures had skidded off before I moved. As I got to my feet, or more a crouched position, I decided, after seeing the creatures move in almost a patrol around the town, and I should be more prepared. As this thought blazed through my mind, I snagged an arrow, nocked it, and readied it to be drawn and fired if I ran into trouble. I moved to the far corner of the backyard as quietly as I could, and hopped the far side of the fence. I had 2 open backyards and a fence left to go. I would be at my destination. There was very little cover between where I was and where I was going, but nevertheless, I had to get there. In the first backyard, there was 2 trees, both which were way too young and small to be able to effectively hide behind. Attempting that would be equivalent to a grizzly bear trying to hide behind a broomstick. As I sat in the corner of the fence out in the direction I needed to go, trying to calculate the path that would give me the best cover, I noticed there was a lurker moving slowly along the fence line away from me. No way I could take the shot at this distance with any form of accuracy. So I waited. It continued off, away from me, deeper into the fog. Just as I took my first step across the next yard, a single spider came skittering perpendicular to my path and stopped directly in front of me, merely 15 yards from me, facing in the same direction that the lurker had gone. And now that I think of it, the other spider creatures were traveling in the same direction as well. Are they being drawn over here or something? I thought to myself as I drew back the bow, taking aim at the spider. I wanted to be ready to lose the arrow instantly if it began to turn in my direction. It released a perfect shot right in the... It sat perfectly motionless in front of me. Getting impatient, I held my breath, fine-tuned my aim, and released a perfect shot right in the center of the mass of the creature. I quickly grabbed and knocked into the arrow, not knowing that I had killed it. Without a scream or a screech, the spider slowly wobbled and fell limp on the ground. Staying low and fast, I moved across the first yard, stopping only to retrieve my arrow from the spider, and moved quickly into the second yard toward the fence. Halfway through the second yard, I hear from behind me a guttural scream, followed by another and another. It was another group of spiders. I had no idea they were coming my direction or simply calling out, but I didn't stop. I kept moving to the fence, 4 foot high, and made an odd type of chain link. I did my best to hop over it as quietly as I could on the far side of the fence, where a few fir trees blocking my view to the farm equipment parking lot. I was almost there. I pressed the branches of 2 of the trees, but stopped and looked back halfway through, using the branches as cover. A group of spiders I had heard a second ago was surrounding the one I had just shot, inspecting it to some degree. I stepped backwards and turned around, burying myself deeper in the branches and covering myself further from view. When I came out the other side of the trees, I was met with a beautiful sight that I had seen in weeks. Before me sat a massive red tractor. It had threads like a bulldozer and was one of those tractors that kind of hinges in the middle. I never drove one of those before, but now is no time to be picky. I quickly climbed the steps up to the cab, opened the refreshingly unlocked door. It would have been nice to see the keys sitting in the ignition, but of course, that would be way too convenient. I ran back down the steps and made my way over to the building. It was a big white building with one massive garage door and one windowed man door. I moved to the man door, checking the handle. Shit, locked, I said under my breath. No time, no choice. I'm going to have to break the glass. I searched the ground and found a chunk of broken equipment about the size of a grapefruit. I pick it up, and just before I throw it through the glass, the thought shoots through my mind. Damn it, this is going to be so loud. Crash! The glass shatters as the cement disappears into the darkness of the building beyond the door. Seconds later, I hear a screech in the distance coming from a lurker. Shit, hurry. I think to myself as I search to unlock the door. I open it and flick on the lights. Oh, this was a terrible idea. I have no idea where they would keep the keys in here. I think as I scramble around the building, looking through drawers and cabinets, I hear another screech from a lurker, only this time it came from just outside the front door of the building. I look toward the door. Fuck, I left it open. I whisper to myself. I knelt down, drawing the bow, aiming it at the open door. Just as the lurker approaches in the doorway, I noticed a small white cabinet behind the cabinet door labeled keys. Bingo! I thought as my train focused back on my aim, wait for the lurker to step further into view. A few more of its demonic steps carry the beast through the doorway and closer to me. Each step, seeing the digits spread apart as it steps and pulls back together as it lifts its foot for the next step. It gets within 15 feet of me before I click my tongue to cause it to direct its head directly at me, giving me the best possible angle for the nose slit as it jerks its head at me and freezes for just a second. And it's in that close second that I release. I miss, and the arrow strikes the steel wall behind the creature. The sound of the arrow hitting the wall causes the lurker to spin around and lunge, hitting the wall exactly where I hit the accuracy on an animal with no eyes amazes me. I quickly knock and draw back another arrow. Taking aim, just as it turns back towards me, it leaps at me. panic, I release. The arrow strikes at the base of the creature's neck, midair, and it rolls to the side as it lands, pouring out a bright purple fluid on the spot from where the arrow was sticking out of his neck. It stumbled around, clearly in extreme pain, yet trying to get the best in an effective fight. I knocked and drew a third arrow. It stumbled towards me, trying for one last sorry attempt of an attack. It got within 10 feet of me, and I put the arrow right through the nose slits, dropping the creature instantly. I rushed with the body pulling the 2 arrows out of place and back in the quiver. The first that hit the walls damaged the arrow, rendering it useless, so I left it. I ran through the box on the wall and flipped it open. Thankfully, there was only one machine in the lot, which meant there was only one set of keys in the box. I grabbed them in a rush and paused, slowing myself down. I slowly peered at the doorway, checking for any other beast coming my way. The coast looked clear, so I moved out to the tractor and ran up the ladder, settling myself into the cab. Once I left the house, Grace promptly began getting the girls ready. Izzy was placed in her car seat, and Addie was dressed and shoes on, ready to go. The dog also had been harnessed and leashed, ready to go. Grace stood by the front door waiting for the signal. She began to worry as time grew longer and longer. Izzy sat in her car seat, playing with her feet, and Addie played quietly with her Barbies by the back door. May lied quietly at the back door, waiting for her leash dragging on the ground, following him as he walked. Just as Grace began to truly worry that something had been wrong, the sound of a big roaring engine roared to life. Roaring to life came from the distance. Grace then grabbed the dog leashes, left the girls in the house, hit the button on the key fob to open the hatch. She ran inside the house, grabbed the car seat in Addie's hand, and led them outside to the van. As she got to the garage door, she hit the button on the key fob to open the side doors, and they did. She sent Abby to climb into her seat as she went on the other side to click Addie's car seat into its base and close the door. When Grace went to make her way around to buckle Addie, and May barked as she saw one of the spider creatures emerge from the fog down the street. May crawled under Addie's legs and jumped out the door before Grace could get around to block her. May ran, barking at the creature. Grace yelled for her to come back, but she couldn't chase her, knowing she needed Addie buckled in. May ignored Grace's calls and ran to the creature, leaping and biting it. The creature spun as it let out a scream and met eyes with May. May cowered back, but unable to break eye contact with the spider. The spider leapt at May, landing on her back and sinking its mandibles into her back and disrupting her view from the creature's eyes. May regained the ability to move, yelped in pain as blood ran down her back from the bite. She shook the creature off and turned in for her own attack. As she turned, she again locked eyes with the creature, and it froze in place a second time. Grace watched in horror with tears in her eyes as the spider held May in place with its mind-assaulting gaze. A lurker came running from May's side and tackled her. May yelped and cried in pain, but her cries were cut short as the lurker plunged its sharp flesh jaws into her side, killing her and beginning to feed on her. The spider kept closer and began eating her as well. Grace cried as she started the car. "Mommy, May is crying," Addie said as Grace floored out of the driveway towards the beast. Grace began to yell in anguish as she picked up speed and hit both creatures. The van rumbled and bounces over the two beasts, killing the mangling both bodies. Through the tears in her eyes, she sees in the rearview mirror the bloodied, lifeless body of her beloved family pet and two piles of broken bones, flesh, and purple blood that made up what was left of the two bodies of the creature that had murdered May. I got settled in the cab, inserted the key, and twisted it to bring the massive tractor to life. I pressed the throttle lever all the way up and shifted it into the lowest gear to give myself the most torque. I pressed the gas and drove out of the lot and down the road towards the gas station and the roadblock I was supposed to meet Grace at. I really hope everything is going okay on her end, I thought to myself as I drove down the road. The enormous amount of noise that the giant tractor attracted animals to my location, and as they ran to the street to the front of me, a smile grew on my face. The creatures that had tormented us for over the past 3 weeks didn't even cause a bump as they disappeared beneath the treads of the tractor. When I reached the roadblock, I didn't even slow down as the tractor made contact with the Humvees. It pushed them out of the way with ease. Once they were out of the way, I pulled the tractor off to the side of the road and waited. My wait wasn't very long before I saw the van's headlights pierce through the fog and Grace skidded to a halt along the side of the tractor. I switched the tractor off, grabbed the bow, and got out of the cab. I rushed to the ladder and quickly got into the passenger side of the van. As soon as the door closed, Grace takes off down the road. "Daddy, May is crying," Addie called out from her seat. "No, she's not, sweetheart. Wait, where's May?" I responded, and Grace broke into tears and pulled the car to the side of the road and stopped. "She ran to attack one of those spider things while I was loading the girls," she said between sobs, and then proceeded to tell me what happened when she had completed her story of events that had transpired during her escape. I looked back into the van with tears in my eyes at my family that was now missing one of its members. Rage bubbled inside of me, a pure hatred for the situation, and even more so the creatures that had taken my dog from me. Grace told me she was still a bit rattled and asked me to drive, so we switched places after a few deep breaths to calm myself from anger. I shifted into drive, pressed the pedal, and continued down the road onto the ramp of the interstate. The plan was to go to the nearest city and see how far this insanity reached. We sat driven for 10 minutes on a barren interstate, pushing through the dense fog at a slow pace. I sat in silent rage and despair, flooded with emotion over the recent loss of our pet. Whenever so softly, I felt something cold and wet touch the back of my elbow. I looked down to see Bodhi had made his way to the front of the van and solemnly placed his head on the center console, resting his nose against my arm. He looked up with sadness in his eyes, and the action of his loving, huge-hearted animal caused both me, Grace, and I to burst into tears. Half a minute further, and there was an exit for a rest stop, one that I passed every morning and every night that I left work and returned home later that evening. He pulled off the interstate and into a parking spot in the front of the building. Surprisingly, there were only 3 other cars there in attendance in the lot, yet we still sat and cried together. After a few minutes, I composed myself and took a look out the window towards the building. Izzy had already passed out from the rumble of the vehicle on the road, and Addie sat quietly watching a movie, minus the sound. "What are you thinking? Do you think there might be something useful in there?" Grace said to me after I noticed that I was looking rather intently at the rest stop before us. "Just being out of the town makes me feel safer, but that has vending machines that could be breakable glass, so we can find a few things from that. I doubt that there would be anything more cleaning supplies besides that in there, but though," I responded. Since the fog hasn't shown any signs of lifting, I sort of feel like we should be fully prepared to go all the way into the city. "What does that mean? Do you think it's safe there?" she asked. "I think we need to check it out, and if it was able to be secure, possibly stay here for the night and venture into the city in the morning," I say, patting Bodhi on the head. "Stay here with the girls, and I'll go check it out. Leave the car running for now. I'll either come back out and help you bring stuff in for the night, or I'll be running out like a madman out of there and drive away because it isn't safe." Grace nodded with worry in her eyes as he grabbed the bow, stepped out of the driver's side, softly shutting the door behind me. I could see Bodhi stand up and put his paws on the center console, raising his head for a better vantage point. He watched me intensely as I stepped away from the vehicle. I heard Addie say from inside, "Bodhi, move, I can't see." Frustrated because Bodhi's head was blocking the van's TV, I knocked an arrow and crouched, walking away from the path of the building. At the glance, I didn't notice any broken windows, or really any signs that any of the creatures had invaded the structure. I pulled the handle to the door and swung it open. Not even the sizzle of the fog penetrated within the rest stop. I left the interior eerily silent. Once I entered, I noticed that absolutely nothing looked out of place. It looked almost freshly cleaned. I suddenly heard a clank coming from the women's restroom side. I spun and drew the bow all the way in one motion. Pins and needles shot through my shoulder. I held position and focused on the nearly 30 seconds before I saw what made the noise. It's going to get so dirty in here now. You're going to lead the demons here, and they will make such a mess. The words rang out with an almost psychotic chuckle sound in the voice. Slowly from the bathroom came the sound of wheels on tile. I saw a yellow mop bucket emerge from the doorway first. Dark crimson fluid swirled, with the scented purple fluid filled and spilled over the side of the basin. The two liquids seemed to refuse to mix together. A wooden handheld mop from the bucket broken from its point of 3/4 the way up. The pointed tip dripped with the same crimson fluid. A yellow gloved hand spotted with various drips of the two different liquids grasped the handle about halfway up. A tall, spindly man ran a classic janitor's uniform was all tattered up and torn. The man himself had various cuts and wounds all over him, most corresponding with the rips in his clothes. As the man came fully into view, he cackled madly at me and cocked his head sideways, giving me the same look a terrier does when it's confused. He smiled excessively wide, revealing jagged and broken teeth. Blood dripped from his wounds, and it looked like he had taken some of the blood and used to give himself some sort of demented clown makeup. You're going to lead the demons here? Then it will be your mess I'll have to clean up, he said. What happened to the people from the cars outside? I asked, but I'm not sure why I did. I knew damn well that this person had clearly lost the grip on reality. He cackled again before answering. They would have brought the beast, the one that screams inside your mind. He took another step. As he said this and cocked his head in the other direction. I keep cleaning the messes so that Master doesn't scream. I clean the messes so that Master doesn't scream. He got louder as he began to repeat his sentences. I clean the messes so that I hit the arrow. I hit him with an arrow right in his ribs, through his lungs and into his heart. I was done listening to his insane ramblings. Years after watching movies has taught me that nothing ever comes from letting the crazy person ramble. I walked to him, pulled my arrow back out, and re-knocked it, readying it for the next shot needed. I searched the women's bathroom first. That's where the man emerged. I checked each stall and found nothing, so I moved from the man's restroom. I found again nothing. As I moved to the back of the building to check for anything that might be hiding behind the building, I learned what the man had been doing to the other passerbys. Lying in a line behind the building were 7 people's broken and murdered corpses. 3 couples and 1 child. That sick son of a bitch had murdered an entire family, pushed over the couples and placed them outside for the creatures to feed on. After seeing this, I set my bow back down and went back to the man. I grabbed him by the legs, dragged his body out the back door, and laid him next to the others. I ran back and moved the blood visceral influence of Mop the Bucket outside as well. As I came back in the back door, I locked the door and moved a bench in front of it as a simple barricade. I did one final quick search of the building and then went out the front door and back to the van. I got in the driver's side of the van and heard the sound of Addie's movie up to muffle the conversation I was about to have with my wife. After I told her what had happened inside, I told her that it would be safer to sleep inside than in the van. Uncomfortably, Grace agreed, and we had begun to gather the girls and Bodhi. After we got everyone inside and made one final trip to the van to get the couple of blankets and makeshift pillows, I locked the inside. I made one final trip to the van to get a couple blankets and makeshift pillows. I locked the van, and as I entered the rest stop, I locked and barricaded the door behind me. We settled on the floor in the center of the building. I shattered the glass in the vending machines for the rest of the day. We huddled together, eating our fill of candy bars, chips, and soda from them. Grace and I talked about our plans the next day to search the other cars, grab what we wanted from the vending machine, load the van up, and make our way to the city. That was our plan. And as we sat watching the girls slowly drift to sleep, Grace and I looked at each other with a worried excitement in our eyes. "This is all so insane," Grace said. "I don't know what's even happening. I almost feel like I'm running on autopilot. I mean, my nerves are so rattled, and all I can think about is I must do everything to keep my family safe," I replied. "But I need to be honest with you, I'm terrified of what insane situation may be in store, and all the things that may need to be done to keep everyone safe and alive." With that, Grace and I held each other and told each other how much we loved each other. As we lie embraced around the girls, Bodhi concluded his patrol back and forth from the front and the back windows and curled up against us as we tried to fall asleep. Alright guys, so that was My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown, Chapter 4 and 5. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember, check out the original books on Amazon and on Reddit. It is by Cryptic Nightmares. There are 2 books, My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown and My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown, Searching for a Way Out. So if you guys did enjoy, leave a like and subscribe. Check out Cryptic Nightmares and his books, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay scary.